You can use the exact same familiar products. You can also spend the exact same amount of time. You can follow what feels like the exact same routine, morning after morning, and your curls or your waves can still turn out completely differently. Not slightly different, but completely different. One day the shape holds all afternoon, moving the way you hoped it would. The next day, using the same bottle, the same amount, the same hands, it falls apart before lunch, or it never quite comes together in the first place. And if you have spent years quietly trying to figure out what you did differently on the good days, here is something worth considering before you blame yourself for any of it. The difference may have been much smaller than you think, and far easier to miss than you would ever expect it to be. Perhaps the routine that once felt reliable for years does not feel quite as predictable anymore. Some women find that their own hair, their own strands, their own natural pattern responds a little differently now than it used to, and that alone can feel unsettling, even when nothing about your effort or your care has changed. You may also be trying to simplify things rather than add more steps to an already full day, wanting a result you can genuinely recreate without extra tools, extra products, or extra time you simply do not have to spare anymore. This is not a video about fixing bad hair, because your hair is not bad, and it never was. Naturally curly and naturally wavy hair is not a problem waiting to be solved, and it was never meant to behave like one uniform, perfectly predictable pattern every single day of the week. That inconsistency you keep noticing is not a personal failure, and it does not mean you have somehow lost the ability to manage your own hair. It can be a sign that a few small, ordinary decisions inside your routine are shifting slightly without ever being noticed, not evidence that something has gone wrong with you or with your hair itself. Maybe your waves are looser than usual lately. Maybe your curls are grouped together tightly in some spots and barely defined in others, no matter how carefully you worked through them. Maybe the same wash day routine gave you a shape you loved on Tuesday and something you barely recognized in the mirror by Friday. This happens to women with loose, relaxed waves, and it happens to women with tightly coiled curls, at any density, at any age, and it has very little to do with how much care you actually put in. Today, we are going through 6 practical styling changes, and each one targets a real decision already hiding inside your current routine, whether or not you have ever thought of it as a decision at all. But the one we save for last is the actual reason so many women end up changing 3 or 4 things at once and never solve anything. Because when everything shifts together, there is simply no way to know what actually helped and what quietly worked against you. So let's begin gently with the very first decision, the one that happens quietly before styling even begins. Picture the moment right after you step out of the shower. Water is still running off the ends of your hair, and without really thinking about it, you reach for a towel, squeeze a few times, and start applying product whenever it feels about right. That moment, the one that happens almost automatically, is actually a decision, and it is one most women never realize they are making at all. How much water is sitting in your hair at that exact moment can change how your product spreads and how your curl or wave groups begin to form as everything dries. So with the exact same product, amount, and technique, starting at a different wetness level can lead to a noticeably different finished result. That is exactly what I do, you might be thinking right now. Some days soaking wet, some days already half dry, never quite the same twice. The fix does not need to be complicated. Choose one recognizable starting point, something repeatable, like always using the same towel or cloth to squeeze your hair the same number of times before you begin. That gives you a consistent starting condition to compare, instead of guessing at a slightly different level every time. This is not about one universal wetness for every woman watching. Your useful starting point may depend more on how quickly your particular hair loses water and how your product behaves than on whether your pattern is labeled wavy or curly. If your hair is finer or lower in density, extra water may show up as visible weight, worth testing first. If your hair is thicker or denser, reaching that same starting point may simply take more time, which is not a different rule, just a different pace. Length matters less than you might expect here. Whether your hair is short, shoulder length, or longer, the decision stays the same. Though longer hair naturally takes more time to reach whatever starting point you choose. Try this over 2 comparable sessions and simply watch closely what happens. Think about the difference between a rushed morning and an unhurried one. On a rushed day, you might pull your hair into 2 or 3 large sections and move quickly. On a slower day, you might naturally divide things into smaller, more careful pieces, working the sides, the back, and the crown one at a time without ever thinking of it as a plan. That is exactly what changes more often than you might realize. When your sectioning shifts from session to session, different parts of your head end up treated differently every time, even when the total time and effort feel about the same. One side might get careful, even attention. The back, where it is harder to see and reach, often gets rushed. The result is hair that looks defined in some areas and inconsistent in others, and that unevenness can shift depending on how you happen to divide things that particular day. The fix is a repeatable section map. Divide your hair the same way each time: sides, back, outer layers, and the interior hair closest to your scalp, so no single area is consistently rushed or missed. This is not about one correct section size for every woman watching. What actually works may depend more on the curl or wave group size you want than on whether your pattern is labeled wavy or curly, so it is worth testing rather than assuming. If your hair is finer or lower in density, very small sections can sometimes concentrate more product than you need in one spot, worth watching for. If your hair is thicker or denser, smaller sections often help reach all the way through the thickness. If your hair is shorter, you likely need fewer total sections. Longer hair should be tested rather than assumed to always need smaller pieces. Notice whether certain areas of your head consistently look less defined than others. That pattern is often a sectioning clue, not a sign that part of your head behaves worse. Compare your usual rushed approach against a consistent, repeatable section map across 2 comparable sessions, and see closely what genuinely changes. You use what feels like the same amount of product every single time, and somehow one section ends up coated and heavy while another looks dry and barely defined by the time you are finished. That is exactly what I do, and I never understood why, you might be thinking right now, more than once. The sections themselves are not really the issue here. Once your hair is already divided the way you like, the real question becomes where that product actually ends up once it is in your hands. Some areas can end up coated and heavy, while others end up dry and underdefined, even though the total amount you used looked about right. That unevenness can shift slightly every time you style, which means identical total product can still produce inconsistent-looking curl or wave groups from one session to the next, simply based on how it happened to spread that day. The fix is targeted distribution based on what you actually observe in different areas of your own hair, rather than applying the same motion everywhere and hoping it evens out. Watch for areas that look overly coated compared to areas that look dry or underdefined. That difference is often about distribution, not about the product itself. Before reaching for something new, try adjusting how you spread what you already own. Your useful amount and placement may depend more on how the formula spreads, coats, and sits on your strands than on whether your pattern is labeled wavy or curly, so this is worth testing directly rather than assuming. If your hair is finer or lower in density, you may notice coated or heavy patches more easily, which makes this an especially useful variable to watch. If your hair is thicker or denser, you likely need more total product to reach every strand evenly, which is a matter of coverage, not a different formula. Shorter hair often needs less to achieve even coverage, while longer hair has more distance between roots and ends, which can make uneven distribution more noticeable and worth checking carefully. Across 2 comparable sessions, keep your section map the same and adjust only how you distribute product. Notice where it changes your result most. Your hand reaches up almost on its own. You are not even deciding to do it. You check a curl here, scrunch a section there, separate a few pieces because they look a little clumped together while everything is still drying in the background. It feels like nothing at all. It might genuinely be nothing, or it might be quietly changing your finished result every single time without you ever connecting the two things together. While your hair is still noticeably damp, your curl or wave groups are actively forming and setting into their shape. How much handling happens during that window, whether that is a lot on one day and almost none on another, can change whether the finished result looks defined or disrupted, even with the exact same product and the exact same technique used both times. This is not a claim that touching is harmful, since that would not be accurate or fair to say. It is simply that inconsistent handling during the drying window can produce inconsistent results, and most of us never notice how much that amount actually varies from one day to the next. Some days you walk away and let it be entirely. Other days you cannot resist checking every few minutes, almost without realizing you are doing it at all. The visible effect may depend on how quickly your particular curl or wave groups begin to set, how much handling actually occurs, and how your own hair responds to that handling rather than on density alone. Fine, low density, thick, and dense hair may all show some version of this effect, though how quickly and how clearly it shows up is worth observing for yourself rather than assuming in advance. Whether your pattern is wavy or more tightly curled, whether your hair is short or considerably longer, the same underlying principle applies. What differs is mainly how long that drying window lasts, and longer hair simply gives you more time during which handling could occur. For your next 2 comparable sessions, keep everything else about your routine the same and pay close, deliberate attention to how much you actually touch your hair while it dries. You may be genuinely surprised by what that one small, easy-to-miss habit has been quietly doing all along, without you ever suspecting it. Some days you simply let your hair air dry because there is time. Other days you reach for a diffuser because you are in a hurry, or you grab a regular blow dryer because that is simply what is closest and easiest. Each of these interacts with your hair differently, and switching between them without ever comparing them side by side makes it very hard to know what is actually causing your result to shift so much from one day to another. Airflow, heat, distance, and how much you gently move the dryer around while working through your hair can all affect how your curl or wave sets while it dries. That means the specific method itself, not only the product you happen to use, may be part of why your result looks different from one session to the next, even when nothing else about your routine changed at all. The goal is not to permanently commit to just one method for the rest of your life. The goal is to test one method at a time across comparable sessions while keeping your other major variables consistent so you can actually see what that specific method does to your own hair. You may still end up air drying some days and using a diffuser on others. That is completely fine and normal. What matters is understanding the effect, not following one rigid rule someone else handed you. Your useful method may depend more on how your particular hair responds to airflow and heat than on whether your pattern is labeled wavy or curly, so this is genuinely worth testing directly rather than simply assuming. If your hair is finer or lower in density, gentler heat and airflow may be worth trying first, though this should be something you observe for yourself rather than a fixed setting you follow blindly. If your hair is thicker or denser, you likely need more total drying time no matter which method you choose, and drying in sections can help the airflow reach all of your hair evenly. Length changes mainly how long each drying method takes, not which method is inherently better or worse for you personally. For your next comparison, keep your product, your amount, and your section mapped the same, and change only the drying method. Watch closely for disrupted curl groups, uneven drying, or a noticeably different finished pattern showing up between the two. Think back over the last few weeks. Did you change your starting wetness one day, your product amount the next, your drying method the day after that, sometimes all within the same week, without ever really deciding to? That is exactly what most of us do, without noticing it is happening at all. Here is the real reason so many women feel like their curls are unpredictable no matter what they try. When several things shift at once, there is no way to know which change actually helped and which one quietly worked against you. So the result keeps feeling random, even though several very real, very identifiable variables were moving underneath the surface the entire time, week after week. The master system is simple, and it is not complicated homework. Keep the other major variables stable. Change only one thing. Observe the finished result. Make a brief mental note, or take a quick simple photo if that helps you remember it later. Repeat under comparable conditions to make sure what you saw was not just a one-time coincidence. And keep the change only if it genuinely helps your own hair, not because it is supposed to work for everyone else. That is the entire method. You do not need a notebook full of measurements, and you do not need to treat your bathroom like a laboratory. You simply need to slow down enough to test one thing before moving to the next, instead of changing everything at once and hoping for the best. This applies exactly the same way whether your texture is a loose wave or a tightly defined curl. It applies the same way whether your hair is fine or thick, short or considerably longer. What differs is mostly how long it takes to see the result clearly, not whether the underlying approach works for your particular hair. Start with whichever of the 5 earlier changes felt most unfamiliar to you, the one you have genuinely never tried before today. Test it on its own, across 2 comparable sessions, and watch closely what happens instead of guessing the way you may have been guessing for years. This will not give you identical curls every single day. Your natural texture responds to changing conditions around it, and it does not behave like a machine producing the exact same result on command, no matter how carefully you follow any routine. What it will give you is something far more useful than perfection. It will give you a real working understanding of what your own hair responds to, built from your own evidence, not from someone else's routine or someone else's curl pattern. And once you have that, you stop guessing every single wash day, and you finally start knowing. So if your curls or waves have felt unpredictable, please hear this clearly. Your natural texture was never the problem, and it never needed fixing. What was likely changing were a few small, ordinary variables inside your own routine, the kind that are easy to miss and easy to shift without noticing. Starting wetness, sectioning, product distribution, handling, and drying method can all move quietly from day to day. Testing them one at a time, patiently, is how you finally understand your own hair instead of guessing at it forever. The goal was never someone else's perfect curl pattern. The goal is a routine that genuinely works for you, built from what you actually observe. If you found this helpful, subscribing means seeing more practical, honest videos like this one. So please tell me honestly, which part of your own curl or wave routine feels the most unpredictable right now?